We're joined today by Shelley, spokesperson for Pennsylvanians Against Gaming Expansion. In his budget address, Governor Josh Shapiro proposed taxing skill game machines as a way to collect revenue for the state. What is the difference between a skill game machine and a slot machine that people would see at a casino?
So if you ever speak to somebody playing a skill game at a gas station or a convenience store, they'll tell you it's a slot machine. So if it quacks like a duck, sounds like a duck, it's probably a duck. The big difference is skill games are not regulated, licensed, taxed, supervised, or monitored by anybody. You basically plug them in and they're in business. Casino slot machines are in a casino, which are licensed, regulated, supervised by the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board. There are state police presence in most of the casinos. Some of the smaller ones have local police, trained security, guardrails to prevent underage gambling, guardrails to prevent intoxicated patrons from gambling. And slot machines the casinos pay a 54% tax on slot machine revenue. Skill games right now pay no gaming tax to the Commonwealth whatsoever.
The governor claims that taxing skill game machines would bring in $150 million in tax revenue. Is that an accurate figure to you?
So one of my clients is Parks Casino, as we've discussed off camera. And so I think, and a lot of people, more importantly than me, some analyses of the revenue suggest it could be much closer to $300 million. So yeah, there is some significant revenue to be gained by skill games, legalizing them and taxing them. The trick is, how do you do that while protecting the 15,000 jobs that are in a casino and the $2.3 billion in state tax revenue that taxpayers all benefit from, that the casinos generate. So yes, there can be significant revenue. Absolutely.
And you said, was it 83% tax that casinos get, or 82?
So in the casinos, they pay 54 cents on the dollar to the state in gaming tax on the slot machines. Mm-hmm. So essentially, the state is a majority partner in every casino slot machine business. So people they play the slot machine. They win, they take the money home, they pay taxes on it. Whatever left in the box at the end of the night, 54 cents on the dollar goes to the Commonwealth. So currently, skill games pay absolutely no gaming tax. And slot machines are really the lifeblood of any casino. And that revenue last year, again, was $2.3 billion, more than any other state in the country. The prior year, I didn't check for last year, but the prior year, New Jersey, by comparison, had $500 million total. Pennsylvania had $2.2 or $2.3 billion in total tax revenue. So that money goes to help support lottery programs, property tax relief. It's a significant revenue source for the Commonwealth.
So are table games at casinos taxed the same as slot machines?
That's a different rate entirely.
Gotcha.
And the key thing is, one of the things that lawmakers in Pennsylvania should consider as they look at the governor's proposal to tax and regulate skill games, casinos make an enormous investment in the state. My client, Parks Casino, it's $1 billion property down in Ben Salem, Bucks County. They also own Shippensburg, a casino in Shippensburg. That's like $90 million worth of investment. So it's jobs, it's capital investment, it's the spin-off jobs. And if you go to a casino and you see folks playing a table game, for instance, or even a slot machine, supervisors, well, we'll start at the beginning. When you go into a casino, you're carded. They make sure you're 21 plus years old. You're not intoxicated. Right. You're able to gamble, to play the games. And then there are security. There are dealers for the table games. There's people supervising them, supervising those people. So it's an enormous part of the state's economy. Right now, there are 15,000 jobs in the casinos, 33,000 jobs all in when you count the secondary jobs. And if you compare that to the skill games, there is no significant jobs associated with the skill games at all. They basically plug a machine in a convenience store and they're done. There is one manufacturer of the cabinets in Pennsylvania. Well, there might be more than one, but there's one that's a major one up in outside of Williamsport, I believe it is.
What impact would regulating skill games have on casinos? Because I know the governor wants to put a 42% tax on skill games. Would that add up, like, if there's multiple skill game machines throughout the state? I know it's only 42%, but do those outnumber the casinos? So two parts to that. A two-part answer. I'm sorry.
First of all, so it's 42% state tax and a 10% local share, which is what the casinos pay. And there's another 2% that casinos currently pay for some specific line items in the budget. So essentially, we believe, and I'm pretty sure the governor's office has said this publicly, that it would come up to 52 or 54%. So it would be comparable. Okay. The tax parity is key, because if you lose the tax parity, you're not going to have, you wouldn't want to have a slot machine over here paying 42%, or one lawmaker's bill has it at, I believe, 16%, and over here someone's paying 54 cents. So it would be, Governor Shapiro's budget does call for parity. And the second part is, how many skill games will there be if they can come to agreement on legislation, and where will they be? So right now we don't have any idea. I don't think anybody in Pennsylvania knows how many skill games are out there right now. One of the largest, if not the largest distributor or manufacturer of these games says they have about 18,000 machines. That doesn't, so, okay, that's a start, but we have no idea. There's estimates bouncing around the Capitol of 45, 55, 60,000 machines. Right. It's important to note, right now in Pennsylvania, there's less than 25,000 legal, licensed, supervised slot machines in the casinos. And in fact, just this week, a casino came into the Gaming Control Board, and it's just the latest one, and asking for authority to remove some of their slot machines from the casino floor because they're not producing the revenue they used to produce. Gotcha. So that's, every time that happens, taxpayers are going to be losing money, again, because the skill games aren't paying anything. Slot machines are paying 54 cents. So if you take out 1,000 machines, 100 machines, 300 machines, whatever the number is, that's less revenue coming to taxpayers on that tax. So at some point, the governor's budget proposal was 42%, and we believe that 10% again to get it to 52 or 54%. And they should be regulated by the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board in the governor's budget proposal. After that, there was no more detail, and the governor made it clear in his budget address. This is a starting point. Here are the first two things. Regulatory parity, which is Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board would manage, supervise, monitor skill games and slot machines, and the tax has to be the same. After that, there's a lot of decisions to be made about where these machines will be allowed to operate. For instance, right now you have in grocery stores, laundromats, you've got them in beauty parlors, which I guess is kind of convenient for some folks. And there's a lot of crime associated with these machines because there's absolutely no security in a lot of locations. I'm not sure if you've ever been to a casino in Pennsylvania, but you just don't walk in and start gambling. You have to get through security and all that kind of stuff. But law enforcement agencies or officials, including the Pennsylvania District Attorneys Association, have raised some serious red flags about skill games being magnets for crime in communities across the state. So they have some work to do in the legislature to figure out how you're going to monitor, license, regulate these things so that they aren't popping up in nuisance bars, they have convenience stores where all they are skill games plugged in and you can buy a bag of chips. Right. Not great for the neighborhood. And if any of your viewers were to Google crimes and skill games, they would see a lot of returns on that Google search. It's a serious public health, public safety threat.
So skill games are not currently taxed because they claim that because they are a skill game that you actually have to have some kind of skills in order to play them, as opposed to a slot machine, which is just by chance. Are they obviously going to have to change the rules about that if they want to get these taxed equally as slot machines? Like, is there legislation currently about changing the rules like that?
So there are several bills, competing bills, that have been introduced in both the State House and the State Senate. I think the bottom line is it is a curious argument from the skill games manufacturers, because after all, people can go in and play video poker in a casino and win 100% of the time. It doesn't happen a lot. People can go into a casino and hit the slot 4, 5, 6, 10 times in a night. People win every day, every night in a casino. I think the issue is we're not talking about taxing the winnings that the players walk home with. It's what's left in the box at the end of the night that you pay the tax on. So the notion that because these things are allegedly skill games that they have to be taxed differently, it just doesn't add up. We're not talking about taxing the customers' winnings. that's between them and their tax man, right?
Right.
So the bottom line is they should be taxed at the same rate, and they should have the same exact licensing and regulatory structure that we have with the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board. If you look at the estimates from the skill games proponents, the numbers are awfully close to what the slot machines are producing in Pennsylvania right now, which begs the question, where's the skill? So it's the same amount of revenue, ballpark, same number of machines. So again, I think it's going to be very difficult to see how legislation would get through the Senate or the House or across the governor's desk, since he did propose both regulatory and tax and regulatory parity. So I don't think it's going to be, it'd be very difficult to see how they could come up with a bill that would get the votes in either chamber unless they're the same. The notion that because a customer can win that game all the time should change the difference of what the company is paying on their taxes. I'm not sure how they get there, but it's not going to fly, I don't think, my personal opinion.
So you mentioned that casinos use their revenue towards still property tax or property.
Sure.
Yes, but our skill games, how would their revenue be used?
So when it comes to the state, you mean? So the
Yes.
tax revenue. Yep.
Yes.
Yes. So that's up to the law. That's up to the legislature.
Gotcha.
So again, there are 2 or 3 bills that have been introduced. The governor was silent in his. It was in his budget document. It was not a separate standalone piece of legislation. But typically, for instance, if you think about the Pennsylvania lottery, all the lottery proceeds go to benefit senior citizen programs.
Yes.
Skill games have drained hundreds of millions of dollars, north of $600 million in scratch-off ticket sales from the Pennsylvania lottery. Independent of that, the legislature, when they established the Gaming Act and when they set the tax rate, property tax refund is a huge component. It's either a rebate or a refund, that you either get a lower property tax or no property tax, and that benefits working Pennsylvanians and seniors in Pennsylvania. So my strong suspicion would be, although I'm not a lawmaker and I don't have a vote, that they would want to protect all the programs that are now being funded by casino proceeds. And then I think the second piece of it is, which again the governor's proposal was quiet on, is where do you allow these machines? When you have them next to a lottery ticket machine in a gas station, for instance, there is an obvious impact on the lottery. They've conducted a study, it's available online. 3 machines in this 3 lottery machines here and 3 skill games here. Down the street, you just have the lottery machines. These 3 machines produce revenue than those machines because the skill games are taking that revenue. I mean, it's that straightforward. It's just a straight census account of the machines that are out there, and you look at the revenue. So it is a challenge for lawmakers. They're going to want to protect the lottery because it's the only lottery in the country where all the proceeds go to senior citizens. I should say older Pennsylvanians, I'm sorry. So all the revenue is dedicated for older Pennsylvanians, and they're going to need to figure out to make sure that they protect, I think they're going to have to protect that revenue in those programs that benefit seniors and the property tax relief fund.
When casinos opened in the early 2000s in Pennsylvania, did the lottery numbers then go down, or was that just the fact that skill game machines are more like accessible to anyone, basically? That's
correct. It was basically, it is the location of skill games right next to lottery kiosk machines in convenience stores. And now we don't know how many skill games there are in Pennsylvania because there's nobody out there counting. There is one major provider of the machines, and they say 18,000. What they haven't shared is how much revenue they're making, how much money those machines are pulling in. And the question is that coming at the expense of lottery? And if you look at the lottery's data and their report, the answer is yes, absolutely. You can pay off a lot more. You get a bigger payout right away. It's a different experience. When you put skill games next to lottery ticket machines, lottery loses money, and that hurts senior Pennsylvanians. So that's one of the issues they're going to have to figure out how to address. How do we protect do we want these machines in grocery stores and convenience stores, beauty parlors, bowling alleys, golf courses? I can go on. They're everywhere. So that's, I think, going to be a major issue for legislators.
So you mentioned that you would like the skill game machines to be regulated by the Gaming Control Board. but Senator Gene Ya mentioned that he would prefer if they were regulated by the Department of Revenue. Why do you prefer the Gaming Control Board over the Department of Revenue?
Well, I'm going to defer on this one. I think it's more important to note that the governor thinks it should be regulated by the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board. And the answer is pretty straightforward. The Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board was established, license, regulate, supervise gaming. The Department of Revenue does help with is responsible for the lottery, but they don't do licensing. They don't do the background checks. Every slot machine in Pennsylvania in a casino is wired into a central computer. Skill games aren't. So there's a huge difference between what the Pennsylvania Department of Revenue and the Gaming Control Board can do. My analogy is you're not going to ask the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture to check banks to make sure they're doing the right thing. You're not going to have the Department of Banking do PennDOT bridge inspections for them. It doesn't make any sense. There is an agency in the state, it's called the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board. By all accounts, except for one skill game provider, based on no evidence whatsoever, by the way, the Gaming Control Board is responsible for managing, regulating, supervising, licensing gaming, and that's where these machines should be.
Casinos have to have specific licenses in order to operate, and are background checks like these and licenses required for skill game parlors or anyone who has a skill game machine in their business at all?
No. So right now, it's a curious development. There are skill game parlors popping up all over the state, which is also an enormous public safety challenge. There's a lot of cash flying around, and there's no security in a lot of these places. There's nobody checking ID at the door. They are. There's testimony out of the city of Philadelphia, Delaware County, some other counties in the southeast and across the state, where these machines are popping up and where they're putting them in a full-blown skills parlor. There are actually two in the Harrisburg area. That's a whole different creature. And those places there is no requirement for security. There's no background checks. There's nothing like we have at at a casino. And it's a public safety threat. And then basically, at a casino, you have provisions for anti-money laundering. You have trained professionals who look for that. So if someone comes into the casino and they have $5,001 bills, slight exaggeration, but it's a serious concern. So there are a host of regulations and security measures put in place. From the very beginning of the gaming in Pennsylvania, lawmakers wanted safe, fair gaming. They wanted to create jobs, and they wanted to create tax revenues. And by all accounts, Pennsylvania has delivered on that. The casino industry over the years, as I'm sure you're aware, they've added licenses, they've added casinos. Right now there are 17 casinos in Pennsylvania. They have checked those three boxes at every single term when they've expanded the bill. Jobs in the casino and then construction jobs beyond. Now remember, skill games, essentially, you just plug them into the wall. Parks Casino spent almost $900 million investment in Bensalem, and I believe it's $85 or $90 million in Shippensburg, Pennsylvania, building a casino. So that's construction jobs, electricians, architects, for building the place. And then you have the entire teams that have to maintain it and keep it going. I think one note of interest to your viewers, when COVID hit, the casinos were closed down under the direction of Governor Wolf. Parks Casino kept all the employees on payroll and had their benefits. And they had to invest in, I believe it was 200 to 250 people for security to make sure that nothing happened to the building. So they'd have a continuing investment going on no matter what. Skill games do not provide any of that because they don't build anything. So it's a totally different world. And I think lawmakers, that was the goal from the beginning. They've expanded the act a couple different times, and at each turn, those were the three top priorities: taxes, jobs, and fair, safe play. And the industry's delivered. The casino industry has delivered.
What types of businesses do you believe should have skill games? I know that there's a concern about if it's in a pizza place, there would be families, and a little kid could walk over and use one. And like you said, there's not really any security. And I know that in Philadelphia, they have banned skill games and in any of their businesses unless it has a casino or liquor license and at least 30 seats. Why this criteria? What do you think would be the best middleman?
So obviously that's a call for the legislators, but you have to be able to have secure gaming. And again, if your viewers were to Google assault, robbery, crimes, shootings, skill games, they're going to get a lot of returns. So it has to be a facility where you can manage the games and make sure that you are providing security and have safe play. You can't just plug one of these machines in there are places in Philadelphia that testimony at a Senate Democrat Policy Committee hearing that basically they're selling a drink for a couple dollars in a plastic cup and you can go play a skill game. That's not going to fly. It's not safe. People are getting hurt as a result of that. In terms of locations, one of the key areas of focus for the skill game proponents are on the social clubs and the VFWs and the American Legions and all that. That's a very it's a smaller audience than obviously every storefront in the Commonwealth. Some of these social clubs, everybody knows they are an important part of some community, the fabric of a lot of communities in Pennsylvania. And so there is that would be, I think, a reasonable starting point. But if you start talking about every bar, every liquor license, every convenience store, you just can't control it. So lawmakers are going to have to figure out how many machines they want total and where they're going to have these machines placed. And that's going to be hotly debated coming up.
Two new other modern ways of gaming have popped up recently, which is internet gaming and these VGTs, video gaming terminals.
Sure.
How do those fit into this conversation and who regulates those?
So video gaming terminals are regulated by the Pennsylvania Game Control Board because basically a VGT and a slot machine, in my opinion, still game. Walks like a duck, quacks like a duck. It's a duck. They're the same thing, right? So the act was expanded, and VGTs are now allowed in truck stops that meet certain criteria. It's gallons sold and enough space for the facility. You have a separate entrance to come in. There's a camera in the sky. They're tightly regulated. They're licensed, and so the VGTs are totally different than the skill games right now. So that is probably a good starting point for lawmakers. What kind of requirements do you have around video gaming terminals at these truck stops for security, for instance, for licensing, for making sure that all the safety measures are in effect, they're secure, that there's an eye in the sky so they can manage and look at what's going on in Harrisburg, that the state police are involved. That would seem to be, I think, for most people, a reasonable starting point for discussion about how you would treat skill games. So they are just like a slot machine. They produce taxes, and in truck stops and in a licensed facility, that's what you have to have. You need that security to guarantee safety and fair play, which the skill games do not have.
What about the internet gaming? So
iGaming, sports wagering, it's all relatively new. The one thing I will say about Pennsylvania and the industry, the gaming industry is not what it used to be even 5, 7, 10 years ago.
Sure, yeah.
Changing quite a lot. So lawmakers have recognized that, and they've expanded gaming to allow internet gaming and gaming on sports in Pennsylvania. And again, it's all licensed, it's taxed, it's supervised, it's monitored. So that, I think, skill games, again, it's a machine into the wall. I think the internet-based gaming has been very successful for Pennsylvania because, after all, one thing that we should all understand about this debate, the Commonwealth, every year they need to pass a state budget, and that requires revenue.
Right.
And so gaming has been able to, the gaming industry, the casinos have been able to produce enormous amounts of revenue for the Commonwealth. Again, $2.3 billion and change, more than any other state in the country. So that, I think, is also probably, I said that the wrong way. That is clearly a driver of this conversation, is we need revenue. Where do we get the revenue? If they decide to do gaming, now the governor did have it in his budget. There's talk about cannabis, recreational adult use cannabis as well. Although I think the gaming conversation is much further along than that conversation is, at least today. That could change. So I do think that in terms of what makes it different than the skill games is it's licensed, regulated, supervised. Now, there are And again, part of the casino, it's one of the offerings that the casinos have for their customers. And if you just go into any casino today in Pennsylvania, recognizing that you can play online from home, but there is an affinity people have for their favorite casino. I actually tried to do this. I went into Parks Casino in Chipsburg, started counting the number of employees who were walking around. That's the key difference.
Right.
Obviously, internet gaming, but it doesn't happen in Pennsylvania without that casino footprint. So, and I think that's a key distinction to the entire conversation is how do you want to regulate these things? Do you really want gaming the way the skill games have exploded across the Commonwealth, where we don't know how many there are, how much money they're making. We don't know where the machines are. So there's been a lot of talk and testifying in Harrisburg about skill games, but there's this black hole. We don't know what's going on out there. In fact, the largest distributor of machines, we will promise lawmakers, as a Senate Oversight Committee, number of machines, how much revenue, and number of locations where the machines are. And that's important because as you raised the point earlier about these these skills parlors, that's a different animal altogether than having two machines at a gas station, for instance. Both of them can't happen without being regulated, but nobody in the casino industry, I don't think a whole lot of lawmakers would anticipate skill games parlors popping up, because that would be a direct threat to the 15,000 jobs and the $22.3 billion in taxes that the casinos in Pennsylvania are now producing.
Last question, what does this look like in other states? Are there other states working on skill game regulations at all?
It's like the Wild West. Gaming is such a rapidly changing industry that, yes, there are a lot of states where they're having these same discussions. There's Virginia, Kentucky. There's been litigation filed back and forth. One state will legalize it, and then they'll pass a bill, overturned by the courts. In Pennsylvania, we have some Commonwealth court rulings, one Supreme Court ruling on one manufacturer's game, not the largest manufacturer, by the way, of skill games. So yeah, it's a rapidly changing industry, and by the time we're done having this conversation, there might be 2 more states who have outlawed skill games and maybe one advanced a bill to legalize them. So it's changing quite quickly.
We have been speaking with Pete Shelly, spokesperson for Pennsylvanians Against Gaming Expansion. Thank you for your time.
Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.